If you avoided buying a Harley in New York over the past 3 years, your instincts were spot on. You're part of a much bigger story. Right now, dealerships across Manhattan and Brooklyn are shuttering their doors permanently. Industry analysts are calling this the most dramatic collapse in motorcycle retail history. The data shows a 73% revenue drop since 2021. This happened because these dealerships built their empire on overpriced chrome and intimidation tactics before younger riders discovered they could get better bikes for half the price online. We're talking about century-old institutions closing within months. So if you're still considering a Harley purchase in NYC, here's what matters. The remaining dealers are desperate, and that desperation is about to cost them everything. This is the inside story of how arrogance killed an American icon. But before we start, this story of corporate arrogance will change how you view American icons. Subscribe now to see which legacy brand falls next. King Camp Gillette may have invented the safety razor, but New York Harley dealers invented something far more insidious: a retail empire built on exclusivity and artificial scarcity. Following World War II, these dealerships didn't just sell motorcycles. They positioned themselves as cultural institutions, gatekeepers to an American lifestyle that commanded premium prices. By the 1980s and 90s, what started as service-focused garages underwent a dramatic transformation. These family-owned operations expanded aggressively into some of the most expensive real estate in Manhattan and Brooklyn. They weren't just motorcycle shops anymore. They were lifestyle boutiques, catering to a devoted following willing to pay whatever price was demanded. The brilliance of their strategy was in creating what insiders called the Harley mystique. These weren't motorcycle dealerships in any traditional sense. They operated more like exclusive clubs with steep membership fees. The product itself became secondary to the experience of being admitted into this elite fraternity of riders. By 2018, the empire had reached its zenith. New York's 23 authorized dealerships controlled a staggering 70% of all premium motorcycle sales across the tri-state area. The numbers were almost unbelievable. Average transaction values exceeding $35,000 when accessories and financing packages were included. Think about that. $35,000 for a motorcycle that cost less than half that amount to manufacture. Service departments charged upwards of $150 per hour while maintaining 6-month waiting lists. Customers didn't complain. They saw these waiting periods as proof of quality rather than inefficiency. This inverted logic was the foundation of their business model. Perhaps most impressive was how these dealerships generated 40% of their revenue from apparel and accessories alone. T-shirts that cost $5 to produce were selling for $45. Leather jackets manufactured for $120 were priced at $650 or higher, and customers lined up to pay these markups. The loyalty these dealers commanded was unprecedented in retail. Buyers routinely financed motorcycles over 84-month terms without questioning the terms or the interest rates. The monthly payment became the only number that mattered, not the total cost of ownership or the excessive dealer markups. The first cracks in the empire appeared with post-pandemic inventory normalization. For decades, Harley dealers had created artificial scarcity through limited allocations and manufactured wait lists. When supply chains normalized and inventory became readily available, that tactic no longer worked. Rising interest rates hit particularly hard in New York's high cost of living market. Suddenly, those 84-month financing packages weren't quite so attractive when rates jumped from 3% to 7% or higher. The monthly payment psychology that dealers had relied upon was now working against them. Meanwhile, younger demographics discovered what the dealers had feared most: alternatives. Direct-to-consumer brands offered superior motorcycles at fraction of Harley prices. Online purchasing eliminated the intimidating showroom experience that had driven away countless potential customers over the years. Independent motorcycle shops began aggressively targeting Harley owners with service packages at 40% lower rates than dealerships. These shops offered something the premium dealers had forgotten: actual customer service instead of condescension. Perhaps most damaging was the explosion of social media reviews that exposed decades of customer service failures and predatory practices. Stories that once remained isolated personal experiences became public warnings. The emperor's clothes were finally visible to everyone. The numbers told the story that dealers didn't want to acknowledge. Unit sales in the Northeast region plummeted 45% from 2019 to 2023. Yet dealers stubbornly maintained their inflated pricing. Customer satisfaction scores across major review platforms averaged a dismal 2.1 stars out of 5, catastrophic numbers for retail operations. Industry surveys revealed that 67% of potential buyers now actively avoided Harley dealerships altogether. They would consider the product, but refuse to engage with the dealer network. The average age of Harley buyers increased to 58, with zero growth in target demographics under 40 years old. Most concerning for financial stability, inventory turnover slowed dramatically from 6 times annually to just 2.1 times. This collapse in turnover crushed dealers on floor plan financing costs. The interest paid on showroom inventory that wasn't selling. As dealerships began feeling pressure, Harley-Davidson's corporate leadership made a series of decisions that would accelerate the collapse rather than prevent it. CEO Jochen Zeitz launched the Hardwire strategy, doubling down on premium positioning and artificial exclusivity at precisely the moment the market was rejecting both approaches. Corporate mandated facility upgrades that cost individual dealers between $500,000 and $2 million in already expensive New York City real estate markets. These weren't optional improvements. They were requirements to maintain dealership licenses. The decision to reduce the dealer network while simultaneously demanding increased per location investment created a perfect storm. Dealerships were forced to spend more while serving larger territories with fewer locations. The math simply didn't work. Perhaps most damaging was the aggressive push toward electric live-wire models requiring expensive charging infrastructure installations. Dealers were forced to make substantial investments in a product line that their traditional customer base openly rejected. The execution of these strategies proved even more disastrous than the concepts themselves. Dealers found themselves forced to stock $30,000 plus live-wire electric bikes that sat untouched in showrooms for months. Traditional Harley customers showed zero interest, while potential electric motorcycle buyers preferred alternatives from Zero, Energica, and even startup brands. In desperate attempts to maintain profit margin, dealers implemented additional dealer markup, ADM fees, ranging from $3,000 to $5,000 above MSRP. These weren't presented transparently. They were buried in documentation fee, preparation charges, and mandatory accessories. Service bays that once focused on mechanical maintenance were converted into apparel showrooms, alienating the core riding customers who needed actual service. The message was clear. We care more about selling $45 t-shirts than maintaining your motorcycle. Aggressive financing through Eagle Mark Savings Bank specifically targeted subprime borrowers who couldn't qualify for standard financing. These packages carried interest rates as high as 18% on 84-month terms, loans that would be underwater for most of their duration. The final insult to customers was the installation of premium experience centers instead of functional motorcycle service facilities. These Instagram-ready showroom spaces looked impressive, but provided no actual value to customers who needed their bikes serviced. The customer rebellion began quietly but quickly gained momentum. Buyers started crossing state lines to Pennsylvania and New Jersey dealerships to avoid NYC dealer markups. The internet made price comparison effortless, and customers discovered they could save $5,000 to $7,000 by driving an hour outside the city. Online forums and social media groups organized formal boycotts of specific dealerships known for the most egregious practice. These weren't small efforts. Groups with tens of thousands of members collectively agreed to avoid certain locations entirely. Traditional riding clubs and motorcycle communities that had been loyal to specific dealerships for decades shifted their group service business to independent shops. These clubs represented hundreds of motorcycles and millions in potential service revenue now directed away from authorized dealers. The used motorcycle market exploded as customers refused to pay inflated new bike prices. Private party transactions increased 220%, according to registration data, with most buyers explicitly citing dealer practices as their reason for avoiding new purchases. Creditworthy customers with excellent FICO scores, the ideal motorcycle demographic, increasingly walked away from deals upon discovering excessive fees and predatory lending terms. These weren't price-sensitive bargain hunters. These were qualified buyers who simply refused to be exploited. The numbers revealed the severity of the backlash. Industry research showed that 78% of first-time motorcycle buyers now actively avoided Harley dealerships entirely. They might consider the product, but refused to engage with the dealer network. This wasn't just losing customers. This was losing an entire generation of potential brand loyalists. Average dealership profit margins collapsed from 18% to negative 3% in just 18 months. Many locations were actively losing money on each transaction, but couldn't afford to lower prices due to their high overhead costs. Service department absorption rates, the metric showing whether service revenue covers dealership overhead, fell below 50%. This meant bike sales had to cover all operating expenses, a fundamental inversion of the traditional dealership model. where service subsidizes sales operations. Repossession rates on 84-month motorcycle loans increased by 340% in the New York market, creating a flood of low-mileage used inventory, further depressing new bike values. Customer retention, the lifeblood of any premium brand, dropped to just 23%, the lowest in company history. The financial collapse happened with breathtaking speed. Within 24 months, 12 of New York's 23 area dealerships closed or announced closure dates. Some had been in operation for over 80 years. Family businesses spanning 3 generations, gone in less than 2 years. The remaining dealers found themselves holding over $2 million in unsold livewire inventory, taking massive depreciation losses. These electric models that cost $30,000 plus new were now being offered at $18,000 or less, just to generate cash flow, yet still found few buyers. Floor plan interest costs on premium CVO models, which could retail for over $50,000, were crushing dealer cash flow. Each unsold high-end motorcycle was costing dealers hundreds of dollars monthly in carrying costs alone. Service revenue proved insufficient to cover the astronomical commercial rents in Manhattan and Brooklyn, which averaged over $45 per square foot. Locations that had seemed like wise investments during boom years now became anchors dragging businesses underwater. The dealer network consolidation forced many family-owned operations to sell to corporate chains for pennies on the dollar. Businesses that had been valued at $8 to $10 million in 2019 were liquidating for under $2 million by 2023. Beyond the financial carnage, regulatory consequences mounted quickly. The New York State Attorney General launched a formal investigation into junk fees and predatory lending practices specifically targeting motorcycle dealerships. Subpoenas for financial records and sales documentation flooded dealer offices. The Federal Trade Commission's new CARS rule specifically targeted back-end profit models that NYC dealers had relied upon for years. These regulations eliminated many of the hidden fees and forced transparency in pricing, the exact opposite of how these dealerships had operated for decades. Consumer protection lawsuits were filed against multiple dealerships for non-cancelable warranty scams that charged customers thousands for coverage that provided minimal actual protection. These weren't isolated cases. They represented systematic practices across the dealer network. Eaglemark Savings Bank, Harley's captive finance company, increased its provision for credit losses by 280%, a clear indication of deteriorating loan quality. This increase forced a reduction in dealer incentives, further pressuring already thin margin. Legal scrutiny effectively eliminated easy profit margins from document fees and forced back-end products like gap insurance and extended warranties. These had been the hidden profit centers, keeping many dealerships afloat during declining motorcycle sales. The first fatal mistake was choosing greed over customers. Dealers prioritized short-term profit margins through ADM fees and predatory lending over building sustainable customer relationships. They viewed each transaction as potentially their last with a customer, rather than the first in a lifetime relationship. The lifestyle positioning became nothing more than an excuse to charge premium prices for mediocre service. Customers were paying luxury prices but receiving discount-level attention once their purchase was completed. Independent shops offering identical services at 40% lower rates with superior customer satisfaction exposed the emperor's new clothes. These smaller operations provided what the premium dealerships had forgotten: actual value commensurate with price. The second critical error was ignoring market reality. Corporate strategy assumed premium positioning would naturally create demand, but luxury motorcycle buyers had discovered better options from European and Japanese manufacturers at similar or lower price points. The Livewire electric push targeted urban commuters who could buy superior alternatives for half the price. Zero motorcycles offered better range and performance at lower prices, while brands like Cake and Super Soco targeted the urban commuter with stylish options under $15,000. The evidence was unavoidable. Tesla Model 3 vehicles outsold all Harley models combined in the NYC market by a 3-to-1 ratio. Premium transportation dollars were flowing to electric cars, not overpriced motorcycles with limited practicality in urban environments. The third devastating mistake was alienating their core base. The transformation from service-focused garages to boutique showrooms drove away mechanical customers, the riders who actually used their motorcycles rather than occasionally posing on them. Blue-collar riders who had built the brand over decades were treated as second-class customers during boom years, when dealers chased wealthy weekend warriors. When those fad buyers disappeared during economic uncertainty, the core customers had already moved to independent shops that valued their business. The consequence became clear. When dealers needed their loyal customer base most, Those riders had already found new homes that treated them with respect rather than contempt. The current status of NYC's Harley dealers is grim. The remaining locations operate at approximately 30% capacity, with increasingly desperate clearance pricing on non-current inventory. Some have resorted to rental programs and aggressive demo promotion just to generate any revenue. Yet remarkably, the corporate hardwire strategy continues despite obvious market rejection. The disconnect between corporate planning and street-level reality has never been more pronounced. Meanwhile, independent motorcycle shops report 40% growth as former Harley customers migrate to businesses that actually value their patronage. These smaller operations focus on what always mattered: quality service at fair prices delivered with respect. The real lesson is painfully simple. Customer contempt is not a sustainable business model, regardless of brand strength. For decades, these dealerships operated on the assumption that the Harley badge was powerful enough to overcome terrible customer experiences. They were wrong. Artificial scarcity only works when customers have no alternatives. The internet and social media exposed both the practices and the alternatives, creating perfect transparency in a market that had thrived on information asymmetry. Perhaps most importantly, premium positioning requires actual premium value, not just premium pricing. Calling something luxury while delivering mediocre service and products is a strategy with a predictable expiration date. These dealerships spent decades treating customers like inconveniences rather than revenue sources. Staff often acted as though they were doing customers a favor by allowing them to purchase overpriced motorcycles. When the market shifted, they had absolutely no goodwill to fall back on. When given the first opportunity to shop elsewhere, customers left in droves and never looked back. The collapse wasn't caused by changing motorcycle preferences or economic conditions. It was caused by years of customer abuse finally reaching its breaking point. The luxury landscape is shifting beneath our feet. Brands that confuse high prices with high value are falling one by one. This isn't just Harley's story. It's a warning to every business that mistakes customer loyalty for customer captivity. What brands do you trust? Why do you buy what you buy? Comment your thoughts on who's next to fall. Subscribe now. The next industry collapse is already underway, and you won't want to miss it.